Welcome to Desi Return Diaries, Embracing Home Again, the podcast that shares personal journeys and expert insights on returning to India. I'm your host, Avinash Pedi, here to guide and inspire you on your Desi return journey. Hello, welcome to another episode of Desi Return. Today, I'm really excited to have Ranjani on our show. So, Ranjani spent 14 years in US before returning to India in 2003, spent almost a decade, and then currently living in Singapore. There are a lot of aspects to learn. I think her journey in terms of spending 10 years in India after returning back from living in abroad for some time, as well as living in Singapore. And I'm really looking forward to the show and hearing some of the insights that she had from her journey. With that, welcome Ranjani to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to share my story with your listeners.
Yes. Uh, so Ranjani, if you can give a brief background, your time in US, and maybe what made you to move back to India, and then again, spending time in Singapore. If there is, if you can lay out the little bit of a background, that would be helpful for the audience, and then we can go from there.
Sure. So I left India in the late 80s, or close to 1990 actually, and I had grown up in Bombay until then. So I was a big city girl, and of course, you know what, you probably don't know, but India was a very different country then, and US was the delta. The difference between India and US was huge. So even though I was from a big city, I had exposure. I could speak English. I had a nice degree, and I went to the US. It was very different, and it was very amazing. Highways were huge. There were ATMs. There was all this stuff which still didn't exist in India, and I was fascinated. I went to the US and did my PhD, and I absolutely loved the US education system. I had always been sort of a nerd and enjoyed school and college. So for me, just the freedom of the US education system fascinated me, as well as the country, the fact that it was so multicultural. There were people from other countries. So my young adulthood, so my 20s, was spent in the US doing things, acquiring degree, acquiring green card, acquiring job, all those things that people do. And I was married, I had a child, and I lived equally in the East Coast in Washington, D.C. area, and then moved to California for my job. So I spent total 14 years in the US, of maybe the best years of my youth, I would say 20s and up to my mid 30s. And at some point, we made a family decision to move back to India. And we moved back to Hyderabad. So that was not my hometown. Clearly, my parents still lived in Bombay, which had become Mumbai in the meantime. And when I came to India, I thought I would take a break from work, but I realized that I was not cut out to take a break and just sit at home. I'd always been working. So I got a job with a good, I'm a pharmaceutical scientist, so the pharma industry is pretty robust in Hyderabad. Then I got a really good job with a really good company, and I started working. So from transitioning from India to US and back, in those 14 years, India had undergone a lot of change. So, there were ATMs, there were flyovers. Hyderabad was a different city which was happening and growing. The tech industry was booming. So it was a good time, to come back. And the reason for coming back was for family, for, spending more time with parents. So for the daughter to spend more time with grandparents on both sides, and maybe raise her in the way we were raised, more Indian upbringing and closeness to family, cousins, uncles, things like that. And some of those goals were met. And again, as it happens, whenever you take a decision, you can't really predict how it will go. So in my case, many things worked. Moving to India, I think working in India gave me a good foundation for my life, that Work life was always the same. At work, all the facilities were there. There were conference rooms, there were laptops, it looked like my workplace in the US. Outside, of course, was a different story. But the work really satisfied me, and I felt very good about it. But on my personal side, things didn't go as well. So, there was more interaction with in-laws, the extended family. And of course, life happens, and my marriage didn't survive the move. So very quickly, actually 2 years after moving to India, I separated from my then husband, and I had to figure out life on my own. Of course, there was always the option of going back to the US. I had a green card, and some people said that that's what I should do, but it just didn't feel right. So I continued to live in Hyderabad and work, and made a new life. So in many ways, going back to that part of my life, I would say that going from India to US, I had to discover who I was in the US as a person. But when I came back to India, I had to do that again. I had to find myself, find my place in society. What is it I need to do? I had to make some tough decisions and life changes. So both of these transitions to me were life changing. They fundamentally changed me as a person. I can't hear you.
Sorry. Yes. Thanks a lot for the that detailed background and how things went after moving to India. Sounds like I think it's for the family. I think you got the opportunity to spend time with the parents, and I think the big thing that you mentioned about, especially when you're talking about in 2000s, how much drastic difference in 1990s, right, between India and the US, and how India has evolved in the last in 2000s compared to what it was in 90s, and then the Indian work culture at that time, at least I think it is close. uh, and I think you moved from India to Singapore. Right now that's where you're spending time. So maybe before that, I know you mentioned about, like, starting your life again, figuring it out and all that stuff. Is there anything that you can share with the people, like, some of the things that you have to go to, something that works, something that people need to be aware of? If you're okay to share, I think that could be helpful for the audience.
Sure. I think now things are different. For example, there's not that much difference between countries in the world in terms of, how technology works. There are ATMs everywhere, everyone's on WhatsApp, there's social media, there are smartphones, access is there, exposure is there, knowledge is there, everything is in your phone or in your laptop. So, a lot of the unknown part that used to exist, even 20 years ago when I came to India, it was like, do you have broadband connection? These were real life questions that you had to deal with. And I think now a lot of this information is available online. At the same time, there is a large number of expats who have moved back to India. So there is also, access to communities where these kind of questions can get answered. So the thing is, your practical life, maybe you know all the answers, but your internal life, how will you feel? How open are you to adjustment? I think that depends on the individual. So many times, one person in the family says, I want to go back to India after living abroad because they have a burning desire to go back for some reason. Maybe there is a sick parent. Maybe there is some property issue they need to settle. Maybe there's some health issue for them or someone else they want to tackle in India with family support. The reasons could be many. But the thing is, if you are a family with a spouse and children, they may not feel the same way about how you feel, how strongly you feel about moving back to India, which means the level of commitment is different, the expectation is different, the ability to put up with things when they don't go your way, your patience is different. So even back then in 2003, I knew families who came to India with the best intentions, and within 6 months they went back. Either the traffic didn't work for them, the schooling didn't work for them, or the day-to-day life, which requires more effort in India, honestly, even today, because you're dependent on a lot of factors. Those things got to them, and they went back. On the other hand, many people said they went back because they felt their children had better education abroad, which I do not buy completely, because in India, depending on what you want to prioritize, there are many good schools. There are many systems of education now that you can put your child into a school which suits your child. Um, Children, end of the day, most children, I would say, are very good at taking their cues from the adults. So if the adult is comfortable with the move, the adult is making their way through, figuring out things in a new country, in a rational manner, and in general, they seem like they're having a good time. The children are also having a good time. But if you as a parent is stressed always, if you are fighting fires all the time, if you are always angry or upset or irritated, the children also pick up on it, and they carry that forward. So I feel a lot of the adjustment has to do with the primary person who is making the move, and how much bandwidth they have to accommodate their own families' different reactions to the same move. So that is something I would say, that be watchful how you are dealing with your move. It is a big move, it is a big decision, but your family is taking your cues from you. So you really need to include their feelings, their emotions, their reactions in it. Otherwise, again, it's not a very pleasant place to be if that same move is having different impact on each member of your family.
Uh, Definitely. I mean, I think it's a big decision and a big move, right? I mean, whether it's going back to India or maybe even a different country at the end of the day, right? In those cases, I think the family, everybody needs to be on board. So otherwise, it's just not going to be an easy one. And the other thing that you mentioned about, I think, in terms of the experiences that everybody have, I mean, if somebody has the flexibility, it's always a good idea to, spend a month or 2 months not as a visitor, but actually you can rent a furnished apartment and live as if you're living, just to experience how the life could be. I think that should give a glimpse of how the lifestyle in India would look like, and then make a decision, because these are big decisions. There are some hesitations about from a spouse part, like in terms of how things could work out. These are important things to consider and make the right decision. There was one point I think that you mentioned, and I think it definitely good to explore it further, is on the education, right? Maybe in your case, I think if there is anything that you can share, right? I think your kid has done some primary education and then doing education in a different country later. Is there anything that you can share in terms of the different curriculums or the academic rigor from one country to the other country or anything on that sort? Because those are common questions in terms of which curriculum to choose, or what would happen when they grow up, they go back abroad again and all that stuff. If there's anything that you can share on the education side from your perspective, that would also be valuable.
Sure. So my daughter she got into first grade in India. So in many ways, she had not had formal education in the US. She had been to kindergarten. So her first foray was into Indian education. She went to the CBSE board. And since I spent 10 years in India, she actually completed grade 1 to 10 in India. To be honest, she had many classmates who were like her over those 10 years, who started with her or who came at later times, who had moved from US mostly to Hyderabad, and they were her classmates. And many of these students went on to go, since I can look back and tell you my story, these children grew up in India, and then after 12th, they went back to the US for their undergraduate education. And 10 more years have passed to that, and I see these young adults now, and they're all perfectly fine. They have a very good grounding, and they see themselves primarily as Indians in whatever country they are, because of the years spent until 18. I think those are the formative years. Same is true with my daughter as well. She's very close to these people. My daughter is back in the US now. She did her master's and she's working there, but she's very close to these friends who went to school with her in Hyderabad and who are now living in the US. Many of them are like her, they were born there, so they are US citizens by birth. And even if they are not, they were born in India but spent early years in the US. And then again, they've lived in two countries. They all seem to figure out the world very well. They seem to be very well adjusted. Of course, growing up is hard. Becoming an adult is difficult. Every generation has its own challenges. They have all that. but I see them as very well adjusted, um, nice young people to hang out with. So don't worry so much about curriculum, which board and stuff like that. I think understand your kid and support your kid through their journey. The younger they are, the easier it is to settle into the Indian schooling system because they don't know anything else. Sometimes I know kids who came in a little later, maybe around age 10 to India, they do have difficulty picking up a new language because they've learned only English. So writing in Hindi or Telugu or whatever is the local language, they are a little concerned about that. However, children do learn, most children do learn well. And there are other schools, like there are the Waldorf schools and many other alternate curriculum choices are available today. So take your cues from your kids, support them in their learning journey, and they they will integrate. They will take all the inputs that come into their life from school, from home, from their playmates. And if you look at it through the long lens of time, from since you can't see the future, but I can look back at the past and say that it all worked out well. It
Yeah.
wasn't, there is no need to overly stress about this.
Okay, cool. Sounds like I think a lot of kids who moved in that, like, went back to US for bachelors and did
Mhm.
masters and all that stuff. Okay. Um, so maybe is there anything I think you can say like you could have done differently looking back about the move? I know it's a long time back, or if you are thinking of coming back again, or living in a different country, like is there anything that you do differently or approach it differently, or any other insights to other people, right? I mean, who are considering about the move.
I think you made an excellent point saying that since you are making a commitment to change your place of residence for a long period of time, that you don't have to do it blind. You come and try it out, stay not as a tourist, but as a resident of this place. And now more choices are available, right? You can have Airbnbs that you can rent. In fact, right now we have friends from Singapore who are uh, test driving their return to India. So they don't have affiliation for a particular city in India to live because they've been out of India for a long time. So they are taking a few months and renting in different places within India, which they feel may be a good match for them at this stage of their life. Of course, their kids are grown, but even for themselves as a couple, they are staying in different places, trying it out to get a feel for the place before they decide. I think that's an excellent idea if you have the ability to do it. On the other hand, if you are, a younger family with small kids, if both husband and wife are working and you need family support and that's your primary reason, then of course your city town of choice is limited to where your folks are. And that may be fine, but again, think about it and try it out. Do you want to live in the same house with them? Do you want to live nearby so you have support and still have an independent establishment? Try that out. Come during summer vacations if that is what you need to do if your kids are in school, and see how they feel, and take all that data back, including day-to-day life. It will be different. It won't be exactly the same. Though I think the differences are shrinking now. You get door delivery of
Oh,
everything.
yes.
You can order food, you can order groceries, and you can choose whether you're working from home, or you can choose the length of your commute. If you have to go to office, you can find a place closer to office, depending on cities where traffic is bad. So do a test run. Maybe if your employer allows you to try this working from abroad for a while, you can extend it a bit and see how it feels. There is no point to suffer or cause suffering for yourself or the others, but don't forget that there are pluses also to moving back to India. If you feel strongly about going back and creating a life in your home country, the pluses are also there. The things that I really enjoyed about coming back to India was the festivals. I had holidays on my festivals as opposed to trying to celebrate every holiday on the weekend. Like Diwali was always on the weekend, or many of the other festivals got sidelined because you didn't have a holiday. So in India, you have a holiday for your festivals, and the spirit, because everyone is celebrating it or the majority are celebrating it, you get caught up in the spirit. These are things that you can't buy, you can't substitute. So being part of that culture, and remember that you can, depending on you, you can always make friends in a new place. And it's the same thing as when you left India to go abroad, you met very interesting people. Similarly, you will meet very interesting people in India. I would honestly say that I met many inspiring people in my time in the US, but I met an equally large number of inspiring people in India. And the difference was, in India, people at all levels of society can inspire you because the struggle is real. There is a difference in your life and the life of the people whose life intersects with yours. And you have to understand that everyone is just trying to do the best they can. And I was very impressed by many people in India. And so be open to the good uh, experiences that you can have. There is a tendency, and it's a human tendency, to always complain and to focus on what is not working, but many things are working, and a lot of these are a little bit hidden, and you need to be patient and find that. So I would say I made great friends in my time in Hyderabad, that I lived, totally new people who I had not known before from school or college. Some were work colleagues, but not necessarily everyone. So all that is available for you when you come back.
Yeah. I think, as you said, I think there is no like a perfect place anywhere. I think it depends on what's more important to you at your stage of life, and and see that resonates, which place could work or what that option could work. I think that should be driving it more, because there is always be some negative things that irritates. But as long as the major big things checks off, I mean, I think that could help you with the decision process. Uh, so I think you have written a couple of books, which could be relevant to, some of the, audience. Is there anything that you can share or, talk about that, that could definitely be very helpful for the audience?
Yeah, happy to do that. When I returned from California to Hyderabad, I was writing articles for a local magazine there in California, which is still existing. And I offered to write a monthly column on how my experience was about returning to India. Because just like you are doing it now, 20 years later, this topic has been hot for a long time. So even then, people were moving back. There was curiosity about how it is working out for individuals and families. And so every month I would write a column about different aspects of my move back to India. And it was written in that first year of my return. The first year is the hardest for anything, of college, of marriage, of moving. So in that first year, I wrote this as it happened, and I would submit these columns. And what I have done is I have compiled all those columns, and I have published an ebook. It's called No Longer NRI. So no longer non-resident Indian, which was the term that is used for you when you don't live in India. And I realized when I moved back to India that I was no longer a non-resident. I was a resident Indian. So that book is available on Amazon. I write under the name of Ranjani Rao, and it's only an ebook, so it's available on Amazon. So anyone who's interested to see how your move back to India affects your work life, your home life, what are the pros and cons, travel, day-to-day life, all that I have covered in that book. That is one. The other book I have written is more recent, and this is, I think, during the pandemic is when I wrote it. This is the one I have a copy of because it's also a print book. It's called Rewriting My Happily Ever After, a memoir of divorce and discovery. This is also available on Amazon, and this actually focuses on a very specific aspect of my life. As I mentioned in the beginning, the move back to India from the US didn't work out for my marriage, and I had to separate from my then husband, and I was living in Hyderabad, which was not my hometown. I had to figure out my life, my work, to rent a place, to figure out how to take care of my daughter who was going to school, and the difficulties of being a single parent in India, which are exacerbated because there is no organized daycare in India. A lot of people rely on family support to watch your kid while you go to work. Generally, people are not familiar with one person renting a house for themselves. They expect families to be renting. They expect men to be leading any conversation, including something which, one of the funniest thing was when I went to buy a car, and the guy at the dealership, I said I want to test drive this car, and he said, "Who will drive it?" And I said, "I will drive it." And he was quite surprised But these are the things that happen, and I have written about my journey to build a new life. I did build a new life in Hyderabad. I bought my own apartment, and as I mentioned, about my own car. I had a job. In fact, from my job, I transitioned as an independent consultant to help be at home when my daughter comes back from school. So a lot of life issues I have dealt with in this book, and what I have found that this subject is still there's a lot of stigma associated with divorce in India, and my book has really helped a lot of people. And as a result, I've launched a podcast called Rewriting Your Happily Ever After, in which other women have come forward to share their story. So these are things, if the listeners are interested, they can look me up. I'm Ranjani Rao. I have a website, ranjanirao.com. And life goes on. I think the main point I want to make is it doesn't matter where you live. These are decisions we all take, and there is no one perfect path to any goal. Even if the goal is specific, there are many paths to it. And in a way, it's good we can't see our future, because we are constantly asked to make those difficult decisions, not knowing how it will turn out. So when I bought my apartment in Hyderabad, I was so happy because this was my own place. My name was on the board, and no one, I was not renting anymore. I wouldn't have anyone telling me to vacate and stuff like that. But a few years after that, I had to leave. I had to move to Singapore. And again, I'm a NRI, but now I'm at a different phase of my life. So that time I was in my 20s, and then when I moved to Singapore, I was already in my 40s, and it's different. So when you move, especially these large moves, it depends on where you are in life, which phase of life. And did I know what was in the future? Of course, I don't know. But I came again to a new country, and I embraced the experiences I had here. Singapore is very different from US. It's very tiny. It is also multicultural, but it's a city. It's a city state, so it's a very small place. I don't need to drive here because the public transport is excellent. But I had to find a job. I had to settle into a new routine with my new family and things like that. So the Desi return theme of your show, addresses the question of moving back to India. But I think right now, India is in a very good place because it's a two-way street. You can leave India and you can come back to India. And you can leave India again, which is what I have done. And maybe in a few years, I will move back to India. So it's not a one time that I will never again do this in my life. Many people move for jobs, they're posted abroad for a few years, they come back to India, they're posted to another country. I think that's going to become more and more common. So it's good to collect data from people, but I think it's also trust yourself, be open to new experiences. One of the things I feel is that, particularly with Indians, when we go abroad, we want to create a mini India in the new place. We want to hang out only with Indians. We want to eat only Indian food. We want to talk about movies and cricket and things like that. But the truth is, the blessing of being outside your country is that you can meet so many interesting people. You can learn about so many cultures. You can assimilate some practices that other people do, which may actually work out for you. And yes, you can read about everything on Google, but until you live in a new place, you cannot absorb the atmosphere of this new place. And before you know it, it becomes part of you. You are not that same person. You are a different person. So I was a different person when I moved to the US and when I returned to India. But now I'm a different person as well because I have imbibed things from Singapore, something Singapore does excellently. And of course, like with any place, it's not perfect, but it has an impact on me. So I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to live in many cities in India and different countries.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think some of the key points that you mentioned is it's the world is becoming more globalized, right? So it doesn't matter where you live, you can still work. With COVID, we have tested the work from home or remotely. Like there are a lot of things that you can do remotely. The connectivity has increased. The systems have changed. So you can get a lot of these things that are available in the Western countries in India, and the same thing, like there are a lot of these multicultures, that experiences it becoming a very globalized. So it's not like you're making a decision where you can't go back, and depending on that. And then each journey, I think the experience makes you better. I mean, that experiences make you think in a different way, right? I think, that's what the journey is about at each stage, because you experience like how other people interact, or you look at like how things work, then you kind of, your thought process would change. So as a journey, I mean, it's just learning throughout the process. But I think from my perspective, the key thing is, make a decision at any point and not let life lead by its own, right? I think, whether you want to return back to India or whether you want to stay, just decide, instead of like letting the life go as is and later realize, oh, what happened, the 10 years passed, and then, it might be difficult for the family. Whatever it is, I think you can make a decision. And if it's a reversible decision, it's always easy to make. Don't spend a lot of time, go with your gut feel, because you can always come back. I mean, I don't think, but if it is not a reversible, yeah, put some thought through it, understand it, and make sure everybody is on board. I think, but my biggest thing is make a decision, either way or one way or the other, instead of like let the life go by. But just that's quick summary of like what I heard. And I think, Ranjani, I mean, is there anything that we haven't touched that you would like to tell the audience, from your experiences living in different countries, have seen India at different phases, and so on? Anything that we haven't touched that you want to tell the audience?
They say about regrets, right? Like, a lot of people have regrets in their life, and mostly the regrets are for things you did not do. Even if you did something stupid, like got a tattoo or something, you're still okay. I wanted a tattoo, I got a tattoo, and maybe it's irreversible. But most people regret what they did not do. So if you have it in your mind that this is something I want to try, whether it's moving back to India or, even if it is moving out of India, it could be both ways, that just go with it. Like you said, make a decision and see where that leads you, because at least then that question is answered in your mind. So the regret for things not done lingers because you don't know how it would have turned out. While for the decisions you took, you know how it turned out. Like in my case, I knew what happened. I came back to India, my marriage broke up. I did not factor it into my decision making, and it happened. But guess what? That put me on another journey. It made me learn many things about myself. I became more independent. I learned more about myself. I think I got more self-awareness. I uh, developed a lot more confidence, and that might not have happened otherwise. So just make that decision. You will not regret the things you did, and you might, who knows, you might be even proud of that decision that you took. So I would say go for it.
Yeah, experience the life. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so thank you very much, Ranjani, for taking your time and sharing your insights. So we'll put the links in the video, how you can reach out to Ranjani if you have further questions. Once again, thanks a lot, and wish you all the best. I think, in your decision in terms of whether to come back or go to another country, life is journey, and then we are experiencing it. And thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining us on this insightful journey of Desi Return. If you enjoyed this episode and want to explore more stories and expert advice, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts and experiences. By the way, check out the links in the description below for our Facebook group and social media for updates and engaging discussions, as well as connecting with fellow Desi returners. Thank you once again, and until next time, may your Desi return journey be filled with joy, growth, and endless possibilities.